Hi everyone. I've been producing fantasy football content now for the past 12 to 13 years, and I generally don't talk about non-football topics such as religion or politics. But I feel that with the impact of Ramadan on FPL and the Premier League for the foreseeable future, that it's something that definitely needs to be discussed. So I'll talk about what Ramadan is, why it wasn't an issue historically or, in fact, recently, changes made by the Premier League to accommodate it, how managers have approached it, and also, most importantly, the impact on Premier League players with stats at hand. So, without further ado, let's get straight into it. Ramadan is a month from the Islamic calendar, and it has many rituals and observances, the most well known of which is that of not eating or drinking during daylight hours. And it's something that's done by Muslims all around the world. And I believe it's one of the widely observed religious practices in the world as well. But there are also exemptions. Not everyone has to fast, and I'll get into that later on. So another thing I wanted to mention was that it's linked with a lunar calendar. So it can take place at different times during the Gregorian calendar. For instance, it took place across May and June during 2018, and this year it will take place during March and April. And what that basically means is that there was no direct impact to Premier League matches between 2012 and 2020 because it literally took place during pre-season. However, as of 2021, it began overlapping again with Premier League matches because Ramadan essentially will go back by 10 days on the Gregorian calendar. And it means that it's going to overlap with every Premier League season now until 2044, so long as the Premier League has the August to May format. Now, historically speaking, Ramadan wasn't an issue in the Premier League. In fact, when the Premier League was first established, to my knowledge, there was only one player of Muslim heritage that was in the league, and that was Mohamed Ali Amar, better known as Naeem, the guy who scored famously from the halfway line. However, since that time, fast forward a number of years, hundreds of players of Muslim heritage have now played in the Premier League. And the important point to mention here is that not all of those players will fast. Some might fast on certain days, but also there's exemptions when it comes to traveling as well, which means they may not fast on certain days as a result of that as well. However, there will also be some players who will fast on all of the days as well. So an example that I can give for this season actually is from Everton, and this interesting article from the BBC, which basically says that their three midfielders, as well as their backup goalkeeper, that's Doucouré, Onana, Gay, and Begovic, that they've got their own individualized meal plans during Ramadan. So in this instance, you've got a core number of players from one team who will be observing fasting, but it's something that is quite significant that you've got a set amount who are fasting in one team. And in terms of when I first realized that players were fasting during matches, most recently it was Wesley Fofana in 2021, where for the first time, the Premier League allowed for a short unofficial break. And I believe Doucouré was also fasting in this match as well. And they were allowed to have a short break during this Monday night game to break their fast because it was an evening kickoff, and they carried on without any issue. But what's interesting is that the Premier League put out a statement that basically said that this practice will continue this season as well. But what's significant is that in terms of the evening kickoffs, there's only one match that will potentially be affected, Monday night game, which is Leeds against Liverpool on the 17th of April. Now, in terms of how managers have approached it historically, it's been quite different. So famously, back in 2009, Mourinho wasn't too happy with Suleiman fasting, and he said in his own words that there were some issues there as well with performance. However, fast forward a decade later, and we can see that some other managers have embraced it and have accommodated those players that do fast, such as Klopp, and Mane's words for his own manager, that he adjusted his own training times to help him. Now, coming on to player stats, since I've been an FPL addict, the first time that I actually heard a story of a player that was fasting and was an FPL asset was actually Demba Ba, and this was during the 2011-2012 season. And it was interesting how even his then manager Alan Pardew, commented that his performance was affected. And as we can see on the screen there, that the first 3 games when he was observing fasting, he didn't play any full matches, and he did get 1 assist, but his minutes were heavily managed in that period. But from that point onwards, when fasting had finished, he went on this scoring spree of scoring 5 goals in 3 games. And I believe Demba Ba ended up scoring 16 goals in 34 games. So in the case of Demba Ba, his minutes were managed. Now, more recently, in the case of Wesley Fofana, in the 2021 example that I gave earlier, in total, during Ramadan of that year, he played 2 full games, and in the other 2 games, his minutes were managed. He kept a clean sheet before he was subbed off in the first match, and in total, during that period, he featured in 2 wins, 1 draw, and 1 loss. Coming on to Mohamed Salah for the 2020-21 season, we can see here that his minutes were managed in the first game, but that didn't affect him in any way when he started the next 2 games, where he had a goal involvement in each match. Whether he was fasting in any of those matches, I have no idea. And coming on to Sadio Mane now, during the same 2020-21 season and Ramadan, we can see that he started 3 games, of which he got 2 goal involvements as well. So in the case of Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah, it seems that performance-wise, there seemed to be no drop-off. Most recently, with Mohamed Salah during the 2021-2022 season, we can see here that during this period, he had 5 Premier League games, of which he started 4, scored 2 goals, and he got 3 assists. But a really important caveat I do want to say in the case of Mohamed Salah, that whilst he has been known to be fasting, there are times when he hasn't fasted as well for very specific reasons. So in the case of the Champions League final from a few years back, he clearly said he would not be fasting, and I believe due to the travel involved, he would have been exempt from it anyway. So that's just an example of how a player who might fast in certain circumstances but may not due to the traveling involved. Just to conclude here, yeah, there is a risk of player minutes being managed, as we can see from the stats that were shown on screen, especially for those that will be fasting on match days. From the elite players that we saw as well, there didn't seem to be a significant dip in form, albeit it was a relatively small sample size. But from my perspective, it's clear now, because Ramadan will overlap with Premier League matches for the next 21 years, just like AFCON or the Asia Cup that overlaps with the Premier League from time to time, we're going to need to factor it in as well to some degree. So there you have it, the impact of Ramadan on FPL and the Premier League. All the best. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.